The American people spend over $500 billion per year defending themselves against the IRS. That's spitting distance from the $800 billion the Department of Defense spends protecting us against foreigners, well, failing to protect us in the case of the border. So forget Ukraine, forget ISIS. The calls are coming from inside the House. The number comes from my based colleague Richard Stern, who reports on a new Tax Foundation study that the income tax costs Americans $546 billion per year in compliance alone, compared to our national defense budget at $849, which is supposed to protect the American people, yet completely fails to protect us from the IRS. Note this $546 billion is on top of the $4.9 trillion they actually took from us in taxes, and of course it is separate from the economic impact of taxes, which might add another $15 trillion in lost income. Breaking it down, the 546 is made up of 7.9 billion hours Americans spend complying with the tax code, which at 10 million words is the length of 21 Lord of the Rings trilogies, all made of pure legalese. Of course, nobody actually understands the tax code. That's why big corporations hire tax lawyers at $500 an hour. But regular Americans, many of whom cannot name a state thanks to government schools, are assumed to have completely mastered the entire 10 million words of legalese, or they will throw you in a cage. That's equivalent to nearly 4 million Americans working full-time and without pay, doing nothing but tax paperwork. That's the population of Los Angeles. Is also 46 times the workforce of the IRS, meaning for every tax bureaucrat we paid to steal from us, another 46 Americans have to spend their evenings and weekends helping the IRS steal instead of playing with their kids. On top of the hours, Americans spend another $133 billion a year out of pocket on things like tax software, so that's about $1,000 per year per household. So you could have bought groceries, instead you bought TurboTax. Note, 546 doesn't begin to estimate the cost of the IRS. I mentioned in previous videos studies estimating that we lose $3 in production for every dollar taken in taxes, since taxes discourage production. So why work, why build or expand a business if the government is just going to take it? That suggests the $4.9 trillion in taxes the IRS actually does take are costing us roughly $15 trillion in lost output. So 546 in compliance, 4.9 in lost taxes, 15 trillion in lost output. Rarely have so few taken so much from so many. For perspective, that comes to roughly 8 times what Americans spend on housing. It's 10 times what we spend on food, all for the IRS. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. A constant theme in our administrative state is spending trillions protecting us from threats that are not real. Ukraine, climate, transphobia. While it ignores the threats that are very real, from inflation to street crime to predatory taxation that forces us to run on a treadmill until we are 70. Between Trump's promised tax cuts, Elon's spending cuts, and slashing the administrative state that strangles the economy, we can see light at the end of the tunnel, but there's a lot of special interests, from uniparty politicians to millions of parasitic bureaucrats who desperately want to keep it going. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.